Second World War. Rod was born in a boarding school. His mother was a good nun whose name was Madeline. But since she was a nun, how could she have been born a child? When the baby was born, Madeline and her sisters were shocked. They said it was a miracle, since Madeline didn't remember anything, and since she never had a relationship with a man, she decided to keep the baby. One day, a mysterious man appeared at the door of the boarding school, saying he was the father of the baby. Nobody knew him, but they would find out soon. He would have become a famous ice cream maker in their city. His name was Joseph Sullivan, and he was a very kind person. He offered to help the sisters in the boarding school, and he became attached to Sister Madeline, helping her with the baby. The nun Madeline, the ice cream maker Joseph Sullivan, and the little Rod had become a family. Joseph Sullivan was like a father to Rod. Rod loved his parents. In fact, he also made a drawing that represented him and the nun together, and another one that represented his father with a strange mask. That was the mask his father had invented to lure children into his ice cream shop. During the summer, every year, the nun and Joseph Sullivan took Rod to a summer camp, where he enjoyed climbing a treehouse that his father had built for him. But all of this was about to end. Rod, that was 4 years old, did not know that he would live the rest of his life, suffering terribly. Sister Madeline began to change. It seemed that she was no longer interested in the other sisters or even in religion. Rather, she began to hate God. She was out of her mind. Joseph Sullivan no longer trusted her. He did not understand, but she was different. One night, while Rod was asleep, Madeline told Joseph Sullivan that she had made a recipe of a spell that would change Rod. She wanted to give him a power that could make him better. Joseph got very angry and told her that she was crazy about contaminating a child's body. In that moment of anger, Madeline realized with horror that Joseph looked like Rod. That meant that he really was his father. But how? She didn't know him. So Madeline started shouting at Joseph, accusing him of raping her and drugging her, causing her amnesia. That night, Joseph didn't speak. He took Rod and the recipe of the spell, and he went far away. Madeline despaired, because she had no idea where they had gone. Nobody knew why the nun did not call the police. Eventually, neither Rod nor Joseph saw her again. So Rod began to live with his father, Joseph Sullivan, that, since he started living alone with Rod, he worked hard in reaching the secret ingredient for his ice cream. His ice cream was the best. In fact, in a short time, he became famous. Moreover, Rod loved his father's ice cream, and he wanted to become as big as him. But on the other hand, his father was mysterious and a little bit scary sometimes. Rod was 14 years old, and he was attending school. One evening, his father gave him some delicious ice cream, which contained the secret ingredient. So in one night, Rod became fat, and his classmates began to tease him and bully him. Rod cried and hated all his classmates. He just wanted to stay with his father. In April, he had a dream. In the dream appeared to him an ice cream maker with the same mask of his father. That man seemed to be his father. He told Rod to be strong, because one day he would be an ice cream maker as big as his father. Moreover, he told him that his mother would write him a letter. Meanwhile, the nun converted to Satanism, and she killed all the sisters in her boarding school. In fact, outside the school, you can see all the buried nuns. She made fun of all orphaned children, becoming obsessed with them. This was a consequence of Rod's absence. Things got worse and worse. His father died in a car accident, but nobody managed to identify the second car. In the other car there was the nun. She, as Joseph Sullivan had become famous, found out where he lived, and she caused the accident. Rod lost the only person who had loved him. He moved, and he went to live in the home of an old woman who was her father's neighbor. That old woman was like a grandmother for Rod because, before the accident, she always invited him for tea in her house. We can hear her voice calling Rod behind the door. In December, he received his mother's first letter, but Rod was afraid, and he didn't want to go visit the nun because he didn't even remember her. The nun wrote him a lot of letters on all of Rod's birthdays, but he always refused the invitation. The nun wanted to give him this spell. At 17 years old, Rod started to work at a cafeteria. And at 18, in a cinema. The nun couldn't go to visit Rod because she couldn't leave the children alone. The years passed. Rod started to live alone. Sometimes he went to visit his father's grave. He missed him a lot. The nun wrote him letters for 10 years. Rod was 25 years old. He received the last letter from his mother, tired of waiting, with a strange book. In that book there was the recipe that Joseph Sullivan had stolen from Madeline. The formula would have been able to create something, but with equal possibility to create a good man or a monster. Rod thought about this a lot. He took the potion, and after a moment of suffering, Rod was no longer the boy he once was. His skin was cold. His soul was cold, too. He was unable to feel emotions. He had the obsession of the children, exactly like his mother. He found a job as a caretaker of a playground, where he looked at the children. Here started his plan. He decided that he would kill those fat children with something that would avenge his father. The ice cream. Rod, since his father's death, had never eaten ice cream again. But anyway, he studied a lot to prepare his own ice cream. He bought a stall where he lived and where he was planning the secret ingredient. Rod bought a van and a garage near the cafeteria. Rod put on a mask, taking the idea of his father. The mask you can see in the garage is his father's first mask. He wrote the book, his diary. 1975. He found the secret ingredient. Daniel J. stole it from Rod. Rod now has all his friends in his van. He's gonna kill them all. Or maybe there is still hope. In the same year, the nun, Madeline, managed to reach the camp where Rod spent the summer. She is now almost old, but full of desire for revenge.
I will finally return with my precious son.